What if the most dangerous people in your life aren't the cruel or the violent, but the ones who quietly drain your soul while calling it love? You see, danger does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it speaks to you in the soft, reasonable tone of someone who only wants what's best for you. And yet, without meaning to, they keep you small. We grow up fearing those who shout, those who strike, those who dominate. But few ever warn us about the kind ones, the wounded ones, the lost ones whose unconscious need for safety becomes a quiet form of control. Have you noticed how a person can love you deeply and still bind you to their fear? They'll ask for understanding, but what they truly want is permission to remain asleep. They'll say they care, but their care is often a disguise for their loneliness. And perhaps the strangest truth of all, these people are not strangers. They live inside each of us. They are the masks the ego wears when it does not want to be seen. Alan Watts once said, "The greatest illusion of the human being is the illusion of separateness." And so, as we explore the 6 faces of quiet danger, we must remember we are not studying others. We are studying ourselves. Before we begin this journey, take a slow breath and let the noise of the world fall away. If these words awaken something in you, subscribe, not just to a channel, but to your own awakening. And when a thought or feeling stirs within, share it in the comment. Your reflection might be the light someone else was waiting to see. Number 1, the one who refuses to see their own chains. Have you ever met someone who insists they are free, while everything about them trembles in fear? They speak of independence, but the tone of their voice betrays a quiet desperation. They laugh too loudly when the subject of control arises. They talk about freedom as though it were something to be defended rather than experienced. The one who refuses to see their own chains is the one most eager to rattle yours. They are allergic to mirrors, because reflection reveals the bars they've built around themselves. So, they busied their days dismantling other people's prisons, never realizing that the jailer they fight outside is the same one that lives within. Alan Watts described this as the double bind of ego. We try to free ourselves from the very self that creates the illusion of bondage. We struggle to become unchained, and in our struggle, we tighten the knots. Have you ever noticed how we defend our limitations as if they were precious heirlooms? How we say things like, "That's just the way I am," or "I could never change that," as though our identity were a sacred wound we dare not heal. Picture a bird born inside a golden cage. Every morning it sings of freedom, yet the open door terrifies it. It polishes the bars until they shine like sunlight, telling itself, "This beauty is my liberty." And when the wind calls, the bird shivers, because the unknown sky feels more dangerous than the familiar prison. Such is the one who refuses to see their chains, and such are we. When we mistake our patterns for our personality. Next concept, but here is the paradox. The moment you see the cage, you are already outside it. Awareness itself is liberation. You do not need to fight the chains. You only need to stop pretending they aren't there. Alan once laughed and said, "You can't get rid of the ego by force. It's like trying to bite your own teeth." Freedom, then, is not the destruction of the cage, but the realization that the sky was never separate from it. Yet beware, there is another form of bondage, more seductive than fear itself, the desire to fix others. When we refuse to face our own chains, we often devote ourselves to saving the world. We see broken people everywhere, and we mistake their suffering for our purpose. But what we really seek is not their healing. It is our own reflection, polished through the illusion of helping. We become spiritual mechanics, constantly tuning the engines of others while ignoring the strange noise in our own hearts. We offer advice not because we are wise, but because we are uncomfortable with silence. We teach peace because we fear stillness. Have you ever felt someone's kindness begin to suffocate you, as if their care came with invisible strings? Perhaps you've done this too, smiling, advising, fixing, not out of love, but out of fear that if you stop being useful, you will no longer be loved. It is like a lighthouse that forgets the sea. The beam was meant to guide ships through darkness, but now it shines endlessly into its own reflection, blinding the very sailors it hoped to save. Such is the fate of the unexamined healer, the self-appointed liberator, the one who helps to avoid themselves. But there is a gentler way. Instead of fixing others, you can simply see them, without judgment, without interference. To truly see another is to love without agenda, and in that seeing, both of you are released. Alan Watts often compared awareness to light. He said, when you try to catch hold of light, you darken it, but when you let it be, it reveals everything. In the same way, freedom cannot be forced upon anyone, not even upon yourself. It unfolds naturally when resistance dissolves. The one who refuses to see their own chains teaches us the first secret of liberation. That truth is not discovered by force, but by surrender. It is not the breaking of bars, but the soft acceptance that they were never truly there. And so, whenever you meet someone who insists they are utterly free, smile gently, for they are simply at war with a ghost. And when you catch yourself declaring the same pause, look around, listen. You might find that the cage was only a story told by a frightened voice in your mind. And the moment you stop listening to that voice, the door swings quietly open. Freedom, my friend, is not something to be achieved. It is what remains when you stop believing you were ever trapped. Let that thought rest. Breathe it in. And when you are ready, we shall meet the next face. The one who feeds on your energy. Nambatutha, one who feeds on your energy. Have you ever walked away from someone you love and felt utterly exhausted? Not because they shouted, but because they needed too much of you. There are people who seem to draw energy the way trees draw water. They do not steal it, at least, not intentionally, but through their endless need for reassurance, attention, drama, or validation. They quietly feed on the vitality of others. And here's the secret. They don't do this because they are cruel. They do it because they are empty. The one who feeds on your energy is not a monster. They are a mirror, a reflection of the part of you that still believes you must earn love by giving yourself away. They appear when you have forgotten your own center. They cling when you have lost your stillness. And their hunger only becomes unbearable when you try to fill it for them. Alan Watts once said, "You can only give what you no longer cling to," but the energy feeder has never learned to rest in themselves. Their cup is always leaking, so no matter how much love you poured in, it vanishes into the cracks of their unconscious pain. Have you ever found yourself over-explaining, over-helping, apologizing for things that were never your fault, just to keep someone calm? And have you noticed how, even after you do, they find another reason to be dissatisfied? That is, the ego's hunger at work. It feeds not on food or affection, but on attention. It craves constant confirmation. I exist. Primera mator. I am right. Am right. Picture a flame that cannot burn on its own. It leans toward every nearby light, trying to catch fire. But because it fears going out, it smothers the very sparks that could ignite it. The one who feeds on your energy is like that flame, terrified of darkness, addicted to others' light. And yet, they teach us something profound. They remind us that compassion without boundaries is merely self-sacrifice in disguise. The universe does not ask you to rescue everyone who suffers. It asks you to remain awake, even when others try to pull you into their storm. Alan Watts said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone drowning in emotional noise is not to dive in after them, but to stay still, anchored in your clarity, until they remember how to float. Have you ever been accused of being cold simply because you refused to participate in someone else's chaos? Have you been called selfish because you chose silence over sympathy, distance over drama? If so, take heart. That's often the moment you stop being someone's emotional battery and start being your own source of power. Imagine a great oak tree standing beside a restless wind. The wind screams for the tree to move, to bend, to break, to join its fury. But the tree stands, not in defiance, but in understanding. It knows the wind cannot uproot it unless it chooses to dance too wildly. In the same way, When someone feeds on your energy, your stillness confuses them. They expect resistance, argument, or comfort. But when you give none, their illusion begins to crack. And that is where the quiet healing begins. Because your refusal to be consumed is not cruelty, it is an act of love. You are showing them, perhaps for the first time, what self-sufficiency looks like. Energy, you see, is contagious. When you guard your peace, you invite others to find theirs. When you stop trying to fix, you become a mirror of calm. And in your calm, their hunger begins to fade. But this lesson has another side. We, too, have been the feeders. We, too, have called friends, just to empty our hearts, without truly listening in return. We have used love to distract ourselves from silence, used attention to mask insecurity. The energy feeder isn't a type of person, it's a stage of consciousness. It appears whenever the self forgets that it is already whole. Alan Watts once said, "To define yourself is to limit yourself." The ego feeds on identity, on roles, stories, validation. But awareness feeds on stillness. And the more still you become, the less you need to feed on anyone. So, the real question is, are you radiating light or trading it? Do you give because it overflows from you, or because you're afraid of being forgotten? These are difficult questions, but they are the doorway to freedom. Think of the sun. It gives endlessly, not because it tries to, but because it is. It does not measure or remember. It does not shrink when someone fails to thank it. It simply shines, and in its shining, the world grows warm. Be like that. Let your giving come from fullness, not emptiness. And if someone stands beneath your light but only complains about the brightness, it's all right to step behind the clouds. Boundaries are not walls. They are rivers, guiding the flow of love. They protect both the giver and the receiver. For love without structure becomes possession, and empathy without wisdom becomes exhaustion. So when you feel your energy being drained, do not rush to defend it with anger. Simply return to yourself. Feel your breath. Let silence refill your cup. The most powerful act of generosity is to remain whole in a world that constantly asks you to fragment. The one who feeds on your energy is not your enemy. They are your teacher in disguise. A living reminder that peace begins where dependency ends. And perhaps, as Alan Watts said, when you realize that you are not the doer, but the happening itself, life becomes play rather than struggle. When you no longer feed or are fed upon. When you can stand in the middle of others' storms and still hear your own breath, you will have learned the rare art of peaceful detachment. So if ever you find yourself tired, not from work, but from people, remember, you are not a battery. You are the current itself. And the moment you stop trying to keep the lights on for others, the sun rises quietly within you. Now, ... Let Oese move on to meet the next face of quiet danger, the one who pretends to be a victim. Number 3, the one who pretends to be a victim. Have you ever noticed how some people wear their pain like a crown of thorns, proud of their wounds, as though suffering itself were proof of depth? There is a quiet nobility in pain, yes, but there is also a subtle seduction. For the ego has learned that pity feels a lot like love, and so it begins to feed upon it. The one who pretends to be a victim is not merely crying for help. They are protecting an identity. They have found safety in helplessness. Because if the world is cruel and they are forever wronged, then they never need to face the terrifying freedom of choosing their own life. Alan Watts once said, "The more we struggle for perfection, the more imperfection we create." Likewise, the more we cling to the story of being wronged, the more wrong appears. Have you ever caught yourself repeating a painful story long after it has ended, as if the retelling itself kept you alive? It's strange, isn't it? We say we want healing, yet secretly we fear it. Because when pain leaves, who will we be without it? Picture a person standing before a fire. The flames warm them, but the smoke chokes them. Instead of stepping back, they wave the smoke toward themselves, coughing, crying, and shouting to anyone who will listen, "Look what the fire is doing to me." But the fire was never chasing them. They simply refuse to move. Such is the victim ego. It confuses self-soothing with self-sabotage. The deeper tragedy is this. Victimhood can feel spiritual. It gives a person the illusion of innocence. They believe, if I am hurt, I must be pure. But purity born from pain is just pain, pretending to be holy. Alan Watts smiled at such seriousness. He said, to take yourself seriously is to be in great danger. And that is precisely what the false victim does. They take their suffering as proof of importance. But there is another side to this mask to the rescuer. Who needs the victim? Every victim creates a savior, and every savior secretly longs to be a victim. They are two ends of the same rope, pulling on each other to stay alive. One says, save me. The other says, without you, I'm nothing. And both forget that the rope was never tied to anything real. When you rescue someone who will not rise, you are not helping them. You are protecting their story, and perhaps your own. Have you ever noticed how comforting it feels to be needed by someone who suffers? There's a sweetness in it. You feel noble, essential, but underneath, there's also fear. Because if they heal, your role disappears. So the dance continues. One weeps to stay loved, the other fixes to stay worthy. Both are caught in the theater of suffering. Imagine a play that never ends. The lights are dim, the audience long gone, but the actors remain, reciting their lines from habit. No one remembers how the story began, or why they keep performing. They stay because silence feels more frightening than pain. Such is the bond between the victim and the savior. They are lovers of their own tragedy. True compassion does not indulge the story. It listens once, understands, and then gently invites silence. Because silence is the space where the story cannot breathe, and without air, the illusion dies. Alan Watts called it dying before you die, to let the identity dissolve before the body follows. When the false victim dares to stop telling the story, a miracle happens. They discover they were never the character, but the witness of the play. But do not judge them. For we have all played that role. We have all whispered to ourselves, no one understands me, and felt secretly comforted by the drama. It gave us a sense of depth, a reason for our loneliness. Yet depth is not born from despair. It is born from awareness, and awareness can exist even in laughter. Watts loved to remind us, the universe is playing hide-and-seek with itself. Perhaps suffering is simply the cosmic game of pretending to be lost, so that joy may rediscover itself again. So ask yourself, is your sadness still serving you? Do you nurture it because it makes you feel special, or have you grown tired of its weight? If you have, there's no need for guilt. Just stop feeding the story. Let silence finish it for you. Think of a pond after a storm. The wind thrashes the surface. The waves distort every reflection. But when the wind dies, nothing needs to be done. The water clears itself. So too does the mind when you stop stirring it with why. Freedom from victimhood does not mean denial of pain. It means seeing pain as whether something that moves through you, not something you become. When you can say, I am experiencing sorrow, instead of, I am sorrow, you have already stepped beyond it. You begin to sense that the self who suffers is but a ripple on the vast ocean of awareness, and the ocean was never harmed by the wave. The one who pretends to be a victim teaches us the second great secret of awakening. That identity built from suffering will always need suffering to survive. So, when you meet such a soul or catch that voice within yourself, do not fight it and do not feed it. Simply say iti, the way light sees shadow, without judgment, without attachment. And as you see, you will feel something gentle arise. A smile that belongs to no one. That is awareness remembering itself. Alan Watts would probably chuckle here and say, you don't have to be serious to be sincere. Yes, we can even laugh at our pain. For laughter, too, is holy dot. So next time someone tells you their life is cursed, listen once, deeply, and then, instead of sympathy, offer silence. That silence is the sound of the universe inviting them to drop the act. And perhaps, as they do, they'll discover what you are discovering now, that behind every story of pain is the same still awareness. Untouched, unchained, eternally free. And now, take a breath. Let the theater fade. Our next visitor waits, the one who worships control. Number 4, the one who worships control. There is a peculiar madness in the human mind, the need to control what was never meant to be owned. The weather, time, love, death, even one another. We try to bend the wind to our will, forgetting that it moves precisely because it is free. The one who worships control does not seek peace. They seek certainty. And certainty, my friend, is the most seductive illusion of them all. They believe that by holding tighter, they can stop life from changing. But life is the art of change itself. To control it is to strangle the very thing you wish to preserve. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to be right all the time? To correct, to predict, to manage every outcome. It's like standing before the ocean and demanding the tide obey your calendar. Watts once laughed and said, "Muddy water's best cleared by leaving it alone." But the controller cannot bear to leave things alone. They stir the water endlessly, trying to make it still. And in that restless stirring, they lose sight of their own reflection. To the controller, surrender feels like death, because control is their god, and letting go is blasphemy. They fear the fall, yet do not see that falling is how the bird learns to fly. Imagine a man holding sand in his fist. The tighter he grips, the faster it slips away. But if he opens his hand, the sand rests gently in his palm. That is the paradox of control. The moment you stop trying to hold it, it holds itself. Control is born from fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of loss, fear of insignificance. And yet, every form of control is just that fear wearing a uniform. You can polish it, rationalize it, even disguise it as discipline. But beneath it all, it trembles. Have you ever tried to plan your life down to the smallest detail, only to watch reality laugh at your schedule? That laughter is not cruelty. It's compassion. It's the universe reminding you that you are part of a dance, not the choreographer. When you fight the rhythm, you stumble. When you listen, you begin to move with it, and in that movement, you find what no control could ever give: grace. The one who worships control believes freedom comes from order, but true freedom comes from trust. Not blind faith, but the quiet confidence that life knows what it's doing, even when you don't. Look at a river. It never forces its way through stone. It moves with patience, finding the path of least resistance. And in time, it shapes mountains. So too does a mind that trusts the current. Alan Watts often compared human control to trying to improve upon music while it's playing. We keep interrupting the melody to correct the notes, and in doing so, we forget to listen. He would say, life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. But the controller doesn't live. They calculate. They measure the temperature of love, the timing of success, the safety of the unknown. And yet, nothing suffocates life faster than trying to guarantee it. There's a deeper tragedy here. Those who crave control often began in chaos. They learned early that unpredictability meant pain. So they built walls, plans, and rules, believing order would protect them. But walls built from fear always become prisons. And so, they walk among us, appearing strong, composed, responsible even. But inside, they are trembling children, still trying to manage the storm. Have you ever met someone who cannot rest even in peace? They find a problem in paradise, a flaw in every blessing. They are addicted to control because stillness terrifies them. In stillness, there is no grip to hold, only the quiet truth that they were never in charge at all. There is mercy in realizing this. For once you see that control is only fear pretending to be wisdom, you can begin to relax into the mystery. You can watch life unfold without trying to shape it with your fingers. You can become the witness, not the warden. Think of a leaf floating down a stream. It does not argue with the current. It simply drifts, turning where the water turns, trusting the direction without knowing the destination. And yet, it always ends up exactly where it belongs. The controller cannot see this beauty, because they believe the journey must have a map. But life was never a maze to escape. It was a song to be sung, and songs do not need control. They need rhythm. Alan Watts said, "The more you try to control the world, the less control you have." And so the wisest thing one can do is stop resisting the flow. Let the river teach you. Let the wind change your course. Let life surprise you. The one who worships control teaches us the third great secret of awakening. That peace does not come from mastery, but from surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but of participation. A dance, not a war. You do not lose yourself by letting go. You return to yourself. You stop being the actor and remember that you were the stage all along. Control is heavy. Trust is light. And once you taste that lightness, you will never wish to grip again. Now, take a breath. Look at your hands. They do not need to hold anything. They can simply rest, open to whatever comes next. Our journey continues. The next one wears a softer mask and a far more dangerous smile. Let us meet the one who uses kindness as manipulation. Number 5. The one who uses kindness as manipulation. There's a kind of cruelty that hides behind gentleness, a softness that seems to heal you until you realize it was never given freely. The one who uses kindness as manipulation does not strike. They suit. They do not command. They offer. And yet, in every gesture, there lies a silent contract. A hidden you owe me? Such people do not want your freedom. They want your dependence. They use generosity as a leash. A smile becomes a snare. A favor becomes a cage. Have you ever received a gift that didn't feel like a gift at all, where gratitude turned into guilt and love began to feel like debt? That is the invisible weight of conditional kindness. Alan Watts often spoke about the difference between doing something out of play and doing it out of duty. He said, "When you dance, you don't aim to reach a particular place on the floor. But the manipulative kind soul does not dance. They perform. They give not for the joy of giving, but to secure a place in your heart they can control. They say, 'I did this for you,' but what they mean is, 'Now you cannot leave.' And how easy it is to be deceived by such warmth, because manipulation wrapped in kindness feels safe. It feels familiar, almost holy. It mimics love so perfectly that you begin to mistake comfort for connection. The one who manipulates with kindness has learned that control works best when invisible. They do not shout, they sigh. They do not demand, they remind. And slowly your will begins to bend. Not from fear, but from guilt. Have you ever noticed how guilt is the easiest chain to wear? It doesn't clank or cut. It simply whispers, "You're being ungrateful," and so you stay. But true kindness asks for nothing. It gives and forgets. It flows like a river that never looks back to see where its waters go. Such kindness is rare because it comes from awareness, not from need. Alan Watts once said, "Love is not something you fall into. It is the way you are when you let go of fear." The one who manipulates with kindness does not yet know how to love without fear. They fear being unseen, so they build their identity out of how much they give. But a kindness that seeks proof is not kindness. It is bargaining dressed as virtue. Picture a gardener who waters every plant not to see them grow, but so they will never leave the soil he owns. He mistakes possession for care, and one day he wonders why the flowers refuse to bloom. So too, the manipulative giver does not nourish. They drain, quietly, gracefully, until your gratitude becomes exhaustion. But here is the subtle tragedy. They are not evil. They are afraid. Afraid that if they stop giving, they will disappear. Afraid that without being needed, they have no worth. And perhaps, if you look closely enough, you will see that same fear in yourself. How many times have you given not because you wanted to, but because you feared rejection if you didn't? How often have you smiled to keep the peace, when silence would have been more honest? We all have used kindness as currency. We've all traded warmth for validation, love for approval, and each time we do, we forget the natural generosity of our being, the kind that needs no audience, no return. Imagine the sun keeping track of who it has warmed. It doesn't. It shines because shining is its nature. When we are free, our kindness is like sunlight, effortless, directionless, needing no applause. The manipulative giver, however, is like a lamp plugged into your approval. If you turn away, their light flickers. And so, they follow you with kindness that grows heavier by the day. Alan Watts might chuckle softly here and say, trying to be good is like trying to be natural. You've already missed the point. Real goodness is not an effort. It is what arises when the mind is quiet. When you no longer need to be seen as kind, you finally are. So, what do you do when you meet the one who manipulates with kindness? You neither reward nor resist them. You simply stay clear. Clarity is the mirror in which false kindness cannot survive. It shows intention in pure light, and in that light, manipulation loses its power. Because when someone cannot make you feel guilty for being free, they lose control. Completely true kindness, the kind that heals, does not require chains of gratitude. It is love without memory. It gives and moves on. You will know it when you feel it. It leaves you lighter, not bound. It reminds you of your wholeness, not your debt. And perhaps this is the fourth great secret of awakening. That not all who smile are free, and not all who give from love. But when love itself gives through you, without a self behind it, then even the smallest act becomes sacred. Alan Watts often said, when you get the message, you hang up the phone. When you learn this truth, you stop answering every call for validation. You give without needing to be needed. You love, and let it end there. The one who uses kindness as manipulation teaches us this paradox, that the purest giving is anonymous, even to yourself. And when you reach that place, when you no longer keep a record of your goodness, you become as effortless as the wind, as generous as the sea, and as unbothered as the sky. Now, the storm grows quieter, for our next encounter is with the one who destroys themselves and calls it love. Number 6, the one who destroys themselves and calls it love. There is a kind of suffering that disguises itself as devotion, a quiet tragedy that people call love. But it is not love, it is self-erasure, painted as sacrifice. The one who destroys themselves and calls it love believes that giving everything is the highest proof of the heart. They mistake exhaustion for virtue and silence for loyalty. They believe that to care means to carry the entire weight of another's soul. And so, they give and give, and give until nothing remains but a hollow echo that once said yes to everything. Alan Watts often said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The one who destroys themselves for love is doing exactly that. They are trying to prove they are worthy by removing every part of themselves that might seem unlovable. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you began to disappear? Your laughter became quieter, your world smaller, your voice softer, until even your reflection looked like someone else's dream. That is not love. That is devotion born of fear. True love nourishes both souls. False love drains one to keep the other alive. It is a candle trying to light the room by burning itself completely. And yet, those who live this way believe they are holy. They confuse martyrdom with meaning. They say, I do it because I care. But what they mean is, I do it because I am afraid of being alone. The one who destroys themselves for love has not yet learned the gentlest truth of all, that love is not sacrifice. It is symmetry. It is two beings standing freely in the same light, not one kneeling in the other's shadow. Alan Watts once remarked, if you love a flower, don't pick it. If you pick it, it dies, and it ceases to be what you love. The same is true for yourself. If you pluck your own soul to please another, you will lose the very thing that made you lovable to begin with. Have you ever noticed how some people only feel alive when they are needed? They don't seek partners. They seek patience. They call it love, but it's rescue dressed in romance. And the more they give, the more invisible they become. Their kindness becomes currency, their care becomes control, and their love becomes labor. But love is not labor, it is play. It is freedom. It is the divine ease of two spirits dancing without trying to lead. To love someone truly is to allow them their full humanity, their joy and their pain, their growth and their solitude. It is to say, I will walk with you, but not for you. The self-sacrificing soul cannot bear that distance. They confuse space with rejection, autonomy with abandonment. They are terrified that if they stop giving, they will stop mattering. But this, too, is illusion. For when you stop overgiving, you begin to discover that your worth was never measured by how much you lose. It was always measured by how deeply you exist. Alan Watts used to say, the only way to make sense of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. So, perhaps, laughter is a dance, not of sacrifice, but of movement. Two rivers meeting, not one drying up to feed the other. Have you ever stood at the shore watching waves crash endlessly, each one surrendering itself to the next, not out of despair, but out of trust? That is what love looks like when it is free. It gives without losing, receives without taking. It flows. But when love becomes a wound, when you find yourself apologizing for your needs or begging to be seen, that is not love anymore. That is bondage made of tenderness. And so the one who destroys themselves for love teaches us the fifth great secret of awakening. That love which costs your soul is not love. It is fear wearing perfume. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being forgotten. And yet, the universe never forgets what it creates. Number 6. The one who destroys themselves and calls it love there is a kind of suffering that disguises itself as devotion. A quiet tragedy that people call love. But it is not love. It is self-erasure painted as sacrifice. The one who destroys themselves and calls it love believes that giving everything is the highest proof of the heart. They mistake exhaustion for virtue and silence for loyalty. They believe that to care means to carry the entire weight of another's soul. And so, they give and give. And give until nothing remains but a hollow echo that once said yes to everything. Alan Watts often said, trying to define yourself is like trying to bite your own teeth. The one who destroys themselves for love is doing exactly that. They are trying to prove they are worthy by removing every part of themselves that might seem unlovable. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you began to disappear? Your laughter became quieter, your world smaller, your voice softer, until even your reflection looked like someone else's dream. That is not love. That is devotion born of fear. True love nourishes both souls. False love drains one to keep the other alive. It is a candle trying to light the room by burning itself completely. And yet, those who live this way believe they are holy. They confuse martyrdom with meaning. They say, I do it because I care. But what they mean is, I do it because I am afraid of being alone. The one who destroys themselves for love has not yet learned the gentlest truth of all, that love is not sacrifice. It is symmetry. It is two beings standing freely in the same light, not one kneeling in the other's shadow. Alan Watts once remarked, if you love a flower, don't pick it. If you pick it, it dies, and it ceases to be what you love. The same is true for yourself. If you pluck your own soul to please another, you will lose the very thing that made you lovable to begin with. Have you ever noticed how some people only feel alive when they are needed? They don't seek partners. They seek patience. They call it love, but it's rescue dressed in romance. And the more they give, the more invisible they become. Their kindness becomes currency. Their care becomes control. And their love becomes labor. But love is not labor. It is play. It is freedom. It is the divine ease of two spirits dancing without trying to lead. To love someone truly is to allow them their full humanity, their joy and their pain, their growth and their solitude. It is to say, I will walk with you, but not for you. The self-sacrificing soul cannot bear that distance. They confuse space with rejection, autonomy with abandonment. They are terrified that if they stop giving, they will stop mattering. But this, too, is illusion. For when you stop overgiving, you begin to discover that your worth was never measured by how much you lose. It was always measured by how deeply you exist. Alan Watts used to say, the only way to make sense of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. So, perhaps, love too is a dance, not of sacrifice, but of movement. Two rivers meeting, not one drying up to feed the other. Have you ever stood at the shore, watching waves crash endlessly, each one surrendering itself to the next? Not out of despair, but out of trust. That is what love looks like when it is free. It gives without losing, receives without taking. It flows. But when love becomes a wound, when you find yourself apologizing for your needs, or begging to be seen, that is not love anymore. That is bondage made of tenderness. And so the one who destroys themselves for love teaches us the fifth great secret of awakening. That love which costs your soul is not love. It is fear wearing perfume. The fear of not being enough, the fear of being forgotten. And yet, the universe never forgets what it creates.